Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around it's Science Fiction Saturday once more, and I have two Mars movies for you. The first one is from 1968, and it's an American television movie, which, how shall I put this, isn't good. And the second one is a French animated science fiction movie from 2023, which, how shall I put it, is good. So let's get started with the one that's not good. A movie from 1968 directed by Larry Buchanan, who made really rotten low-budget movies. This one he made for Jim Nicholson's American International Pictures, and it ended up being shown only on TV, and it was made for $20,000. It's a movie which has the intriguing but kind of awful name of Mars Needs Women. Don't know if you've seen this one, but if you have my sympathy. It's singularly bad, and it's bad almost but not quite to the point of being entertaining. It doesn't quite get there, but it almost reaches it. And there are a couple of grace moments in there that kind of come close to nailing that awful entertaining axis, but they don't. Now, once upon a time, William Goldman, the famous screenwriter, said that there are three kinds of movies. The movies that aspire to being good movies but never make it, the ones that aspire to being good movies and do make it, and the ones that are never meant to be any good at all. Mars Needs Women is solidly in the third category. In fact, you can use it as the textbook example of that. The movie is pretty simple. 5 Martians fly from Mars to Earth, and Mars needs women because there's a genetic abnormality in the humans on Mars, and they are very much humans, in that their women are only producing male babies. The Y chromosome is happening a lot too much. And so they come up with this stupid idea of going to Earth, kidnapping 5 women who are fertile and attractive, and bringing them to Mars to help repopulate Mars. For a start, there's only 5 women in their plan, because the spaceship only holds 10 people, and there are 5 Martian dudes, and so they've got room for 5 women. Not the best thought out plan ever. It'd be much better secretly emigrating to Earth and letting the Martian population live amongst the humans. But that's not what this movie is about. This movie is the Martians send a signal to Earth while they're on their way, just to let us know they're going to be showing up.
Colonel, the message is Mars needs women.
And the signal is Mars needs women, which is a red flag. It's very much a red flag. And in modern terms, it's like, uh-oh, the Martians are coming to Earth and they're incels. And so because this is an incredibly low-budget movie, we get a couple of computers that they borrowed from somewhere with the great big reels full of magnetic tape and the teletype machines and things like that attached to them. And they pick up the signal. And then one of the Martians, a guy called Dot, played by Tommy Kirk, turns up and teleports to Earth a little ahead of the others.
You reach for me, you try and restrain me, and just as I materialize, so I will disappear.
Everyone back. Don't try anything.
Tells them what's going on and that why they need women, and then zaps back again and they land normally, and all of them come out of the spaceships and immediately go to a menswear store so they can dress like 1968 Republicans. Meanwhile, there's a military commander who, again in modern terms, has absolutely no chill.
Ultimatums. Ultimatums from an enemy we haven't even seen yet.
He's ranting and raving. He's yelling at people about these Martians coming to Earth and the fact that they want 5 red-blooded American women to kidnap and take to Mars for baby making. He is over the top too much. If you are going to train military people on leadership, he's the bad example you'd use. He's manic, he's yelling, he inspires everything but trust and loyalty in the people he's talking to. He is a person with no emotional intelligence at all. And that's one of the parts that makes the movie entertaining. Thinking about this military guy who's got no chill, right off the rails and off his meds. He's entertaining, and watching it from that point of view, and with this kind of movie, you're kind of grasping for things to enjoy. I nearly didn't finish watching it and went on to pick another movie, but I thought I'd finish it. So the Martians come to Earth, and by the way, the Martian costumes are all pretty much scuba gear with little bits put on, little antennas put on their heads, and little bits of basically duct tape done on the clothing to make it not look like scuba gear. But when they dress like young American Republicans. Would have been more amusing if they had dressed as hippies, but wasn't on the cards. And beside that, this was filmed in Dallas, Texas, not the most enlightened and counterculture friendly part of America in 1968. So the Martians start looking for chicks. One of them goes to university and meets the homecoming queen and decides she's the woman he wants to take back to Mars. Another one hits a strip club, sits at a cocktail bar in a strip club and watches the show for a while. Now, the striptease never goes very far in this movie, but he decides he's going to a strip club, and there are prolonged scenes of exotic dancers doing their bit in some nightclub in Dallas, Texas, which probably was owned by Jack Ruby in the past, who knows. Interesting thing is, with the extras, there are as many women as men in the nightclub watching the strip acts. So either they're indulging their male companions or they're closeted lesbians with a beard. Who knows? But it's very, very weird, and it's very odd. And even though the strippers are quite attractive, there's not much going on there. Meanwhile, Dop, played by Tommy Kirk, who, by the way, was a Disney child actor. He'd acted in a whole bunch of Disney movies in the early 1960s until Walt Disney found out he was gay, and until he refused to hide the fact that he was gay. Thumbs up to Tommy Kirk. He gets shit canned from Disney and goes on to make movies like this because guy's got to earn a living. He meets a Pulitzer Prize-winning scientist, a female scientist, who knows about space genetics because that's a thing in 1968 apparently, played by Yvonne Craig, who was Batgirl in the 1966 to 1968 Batman TV series and was my first TV crush. So I was very engaged with Yvonne Craig on the screen. And to be honest, she lifts her acting to heights way above the acting required for this kind of a role, and she does all of the scientific dialogue correctly. She's engaging, and she's attracted to Dop for no real reason. They fall in love in about 6 hours because, again, it's that kind of movie. And they go to a planetarium on a date, and the audio on the planetarium display about Mars breaks down because they're using a really old tape recorder and the tape splits. And so Tommy Kirk's character Dop does this long monologue about Mars and what Mars is like. And it's kind of good. This is another one of those little tiny crumbs that I was looking for in this movie. And he does a dialogue about Mars and how Mars is dying and how Mars is a beautiful place and all that kind of thing. Apparently Tommy Kirk wrote that monologue for the movie, which he wasn't paid for because nobody was paid very much on this film. But it kind of lifts things and makes it a little more interesting than it would be otherwise. And definitely lifts it above the usual shit you get from Larry Buchanan movies. But for the most part, the movie is really horrible, and there are lots of bits of padding in it. There are things where there's a lot of dialogue while the camera is sitting facing a loudspeaker, which is not the most dynamic way to tell a story. But again, it's them filling up time. And there's also a lot of stock footage of military aircraft, including lifting bodies and the X-15 rocket plane that Chuck Yeager used, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of that freely available stock footage used to pad the movie out to still not an enormously long running time. The military find out about it. They find out where the Martians are hanging out in a place that used to be a chemical factory, and they're using the chemicals to refuel their rocket ship, blah, blah, blah. And they find them, and the Martians go away still without the women. This movie is singularly bad. They could have maybe done a bit more with the acting because Tommy Kirk and Yvonne Craig have committed to the bit. They are giving decent acting in a movie that does not deserve it one tiny bit, and just letting them shoot the shit for a little while longer about falling in love and about him being from Mars, her being from Earth. That kind of stuff could have worked. It could have really jazzed up the movie a little bit if they just had workshopped it a bit with the actors, got them drunk in a strip club in Dallas or something, and just let them talk about it for a bit. But they didn't do that. This movie is everything that's wrong with this kind of film. It's lazy. It uses stock footage way too much. And the story is just basically 5 guys hit town and want to pick up chicks. Not the most wonderful science fiction concept, not the most enlightening or entertaining science fiction concept, but the awfulness draws you in a little bit. And those tiny grains of, wow, this could be better, that's a coin toss as to whether it's watchable or not. It's entirely up to you what you decide. But for me, it's exactly on the line. It's like not bad enough to be really entertaining, not good enough to be really entertaining. It's in that twilight zone. It's in the shadow realm in between those things. I watched that and I went, yeah, I'll do it for the video, but I'm not in love with it. Then somebody in one of the comments on a previous Science Fiction Saturday video hit me to the good stuff, and I went online and found it. It's a little French movie directed by Jeremy Perrin from 2023, a little animated feature called Mars Express. And run, don't walk to get this one. This is the good stuff. This is a really solid piece of science fiction. I don't know whether they did mocap for the animation of the people. They may have done for some of it. I am not sure. And to be honest with you, I was so drawn in by the story, I don't particularly care. It's set in the 23rd century. It's set on Earth and Mars. And it gives a really deeply textured future, which was a breath of fresh air and which is better than the futures I've seen in science fiction movies for a very long time. The story's pretty simple. I'll read it off the back of the video cover. In the near future, it's not in the near future, it's in the 23rd century, which is in the near future geologically speaking, but it's not in the near future in any meaningful way. In the 23rd century, private detective Aileen Ruby and her android partner are hired by a wealthy businessman to track down a notorious hacker. On Mars, they descend deep into the underbelly of the planet's capital city, where they uncover a darker story about brain farms, corruption, and a missing girl who holds a secret about the robots that threaten to change the face of the universe. Doesn't threaten to change the face of the universe. Threatens to change the face of the solar system, and indeed does so. But the people who write this shit aren't as hip to science fiction as you or I. The movie works. You get an opening sequence where Aileen and her partner Carlos, who's an android backup of a guy she went to a war with called Carlos, and the backup in an android body has certain limitations. For a start, his head's a hologram, and for another thing, his wife didn't accept the backup, so she's remarried and his child lives with the new family, and he occasionally tries to make contact with his ex-wife and his child, and is pretty racked up by the fact that they want nothing to do with him. And he also has another limitation in which he is not allowed to be violent to a human being, even though he's a private eye. And so the limitations are very inhibiting for him up to a certain point of the narrative. And Aileen's got problems of her own. For a start, she's single, which is not necessarily a problem, but she does find it quite restricting at times. And she's a recovering alcoholic. She actually has computer links in her brain to stop her from drinking, and she has to deliberately override them. The little voice in her head will remind her that she's in sobriety mode, and she has to tell her twice if she's going to fall off the wagon. And she also has an AI which is acting as a kind of Alcoholics Anonymous mentor. So there's a lot of that kind of complexity in there. And there are other bits of technology which are really interesting. You can have group chats, for instance, verbally in your head with other people. If they invite you into a group chat, you see a little heads-up display in your eyes, and somebody invites you into the group chat. You're then in the group chat, and you can vocalize a discussion with other people that people around you can't see. That's just one of the bits of technology we've got here. And it's a world where there are lots of robots. There are developing organic artificial intelligences which look like a cross between a squid and a Magikarp in Pokemon, and they live in tanks that smell bad. And also the nature of the police force, both on Earth and on Mars, is very different because of all the technologies that have developed since the 21st century. Now, the wealthy guy, his name is Roy Jacker, and he's played by Matthew Almeric in the voice acting. Matthew Almeric was the villain in Quantum of Solace, for those of you who remember. He was the third in their group of soldiers. So there was Carlos, who died, and his body was never found, so his backup was resurrected in an android body. There's Roy Jagger, who's become a billionaire industrialist, and there's Aileen, who works as a private eye with Carlos and has alcohol problems. She also has a number of other people she's friends with, but she's very much a troubled person, but she's a very good detective, as indeed is Carlos. And Carlos is having some problems too, because his body is an old model. It's not accepting updates anymore because its memory is full. And so that then leads to some complications later on. And as Aileen and Carlos investigate, they find out a whole bunch of things. They find out a whole bunch of stuff about university students on Mars, for instance, where one of the students is too poor to pay her tuition fees. So she has a backup made while she's alive, which is very illegal. And that backup becomes a sex worker in the red light district of the city. And hears some things and becomes a part of this plot where there is some new software which will override robots and allow somebody to control them. There are two kinds of overriding of robots in this world. The first one is to get rid of all of the Asimovian law inhibitions the robots have, and that caused the big war in which Aileen and her friends were part of. There was an AI uprising, and there are now a whole bunch of hackers who are liberating and hacking robots and androids so that they have self-determination and don't have the restrictions that they normally have built into them. But there's also another one called an override, which allows somebody else to control the robot, and the robot will go along with it. They're all artificial intelligences, they're human level intelligences, and the robot will go along with it thinking it's a good idea. So it's basically brainwashing or gaslighting the robots. And they find that there is finally an override software that functions. It's been something people have been looking for years. It's forbidden technology, and they finally found one that works. Aileen and Carlos and the police are trying to stop that, and Roy Jagger is part of the people who are instigating and facilitating that. A lot of good action in this movie as well. It's got an incredibly textured and detailed world. It's got some great action sequences, including an organic military machine which Roy Jagger has developed, which makes the Ed 301 from RoboCop look like a wind-up toy. It is a seriously nasty piece of tech. A great big three-legged thing with a flat head and a scorpion tail, which is incredibly hard to kill. And even though Carlos goes up against it, it takes all of his guts and determination and imagination to finally defeat it. This is a great movie. It works well as an intellectual thing. It's about a kind of technological singularity. In some ways, it's a little bit about a rapture that happens, but not to human beings. And in the third act, there's an interesting twist that takes the movie in a place and out of the framework that we normally have of the three-act structure of movies. And it takes it to a satisfying but very non-Hollywood conclusion. And I like it a lot for that. It's a really interesting piece of cinema. The animation is pretty good. There are some beautiful bits of action. It may well have been influenced by solid Japanese anime. There is a touch of influence from Akira and movies like that, but it's something of its own. It came out of the blue. Most people weren't looking at it, and suddenly it turns up at the Cannes Film Festival and wins an award because it's solid science fiction. It's solid character-based science fiction. It builds a wonderful world. It lays down all the rules for the world if you watch carefully. It's not one of those movies that you can just have on in the background. For a start, it's got subtitles. There's no English language dub in this, but it's worth paying attention to. You're going to get the world building. You're going to understand what happens. There's a little piece where Aileen is traveling from Earth to Mars on the Mars Express, the titular spaceship, and as her shuttle docks with the spaceship and starts rotating, her ponytail falls down as the gravity happens. And it's just a little thing which isn't particularly drawn attention to, but it's all those little details in this movie that really nail it. It makes it feel a lived-in world, and a world that you'd like to visit. I want to go to the Mars in this movie. It's cool. It's got nice highways. It's got beautiful lakes. It's got shopping malls. It's got cities, and it's got robots. So, you know, it's a beautifully textured world, and I want to see more things like this happen. I think animation allows you to do it on a much more limited budget than you would if it was all done with live-action actors and CGI, but it works. And it, again, the innovation and good stuff these days, as always happens in every realm of human endeavour, it doesn't come from the centre of things. It comes from the outliers. It comes from Godzilla -1 and a $15 million US budget. It comes from movies like this, which give you a solid science fiction story, and hardly anybody knew they were happening. And then suddenly it hits, and people go, yeah, this is good. This is more than good. This is really entertaining. It's fun. It tells the story well. It makes up for a lot of shit science fiction that we see. So you want to check that one out. You will not be disappointed. And thank you to whoever it was suggested this one to me. My good friend Grant Watson over at Fiction Machine's done a written review of Mars Express just as I was looking at this. So go to fictionmachine.com and check out his review as well. This is the kind of movie that makes me love science fiction all over again. I don't think it's the best movie in the world, but I think it's subtly entertaining. The world building is breathtakingly good. The action works. The story draws you in and then chucks in a twist, which is perfect, but is unexpected. There are a couple of them, in fact. And it brings a world that feels believable and a world that feels plausible. Doesn't give us any particular agenda as it does so. It just lays out the world and lets the characters and the actions and the various forces involved do what they're doing to get the story going. You want to check this one out if you haven't. It's worthwhile. That's what I've got for you this time. A really bad science fiction movie from '68. A really good one for 2023. I can't just give you a bad science fiction movie with Mars in the title and not give you something to make up for it. So check out Mars Needs Women if you want to. Check out this one, definitely. You're a science fiction fan, you're going to love it. I'm a very happy person after watching it, and that's always an indicator of quality for me. That's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Let me know whether you want to see this or whether you have seen it, what you think of it, because it's something a bit different and special. I'm sure it'll turn up on the streaming service if it hasn't already, and I hope it does incredibly well and that the filmmakers make many more movies of the type they want to. You can also support the channel if you want to by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/cherrytalksmovies. And if you become a patron, I've just started doing some vlogs where I'm driving around with a little microphone on and just shooting the shit and talking. And those are going to the Patreon people until I decide not to. So there's a little bit extra for Patreon people, just chatting and grooving. And I've got the camera pointed outside the car, so you can see where I am and what's happening around. I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on there. It's something a bit different for the channel, but I enjoyed the first one I did on the way home from Bendigo up in rural Victoria the other day. And I will be doing more of those, and they're going to be for the Patreon people until I decide to throw them into the main part of the channel. So until next time, when I've got the Monday stuff for you, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch this movie, you're going to thank me for it. And I'll catch you next time.